Okay, well we're sitting here back in Hawke's Bay again and we're going to be talking to John O'Brien from Melbourne, Australia. He runs a company called Profitable Cattle. And he specialises mainly in genetics, and we're going to talk about the genetics of the beef industry in Australia and New Zealand, and how his views on where they're going and whether it's the right path forward. So John, how do you feel about the genetic industry? Maybe you'll start with New Zealand and the dairy industry if you want. With the genetic moves, progress they've made in the last 10 or 15 years?
Well, I think what I see throughout the world actually there's been a very big progression to selection of cattle, actually by cattle breeders, to selection of cattle now on computers by academics and supposedly geneticists who actually don't really know anything about how cattle should be designed to function properly. But they're very au fait with numbers and how numbers appear to be better, and we've become now really just a system of breeding our cattle on computers and ignoring their economic functionality out in the paddock.
So that's sort of performance-based, you're talking?
Well, it's not actually performance-based, it's actually really we have moved to this, what appears to be greater education, that we can identify cattle's genetic potential on a computer. Whereas once it took us 7 years to see how she performed, but now we're saying we can tell you where she'll be in 7 years' time.
And you feel that we've gone down this path of looking at computer models, you're talking about the breeding worths and all that.
Well, yeah, that's right, the computer-generated breeding values that are attributed to every animal in the world pretty well in some different system. And farmers have been coerced into believing that these are the greatest description of these animals' genetic potential. And what the major problem that I see is that the seed stock industry has used these numbers to breed numbers more than breed cattle. Okay, so they've lost the sight of economic functionality. The seed stock industry, I presume in this country as well, but in Australia and in America, has created such a nutritional environment to support these animals that rise to the top on computer-generated breeding values, which props these cattle up. And then when the commercial industry comes in and selects these animals that are mooted to be the cattle with the most genetic gain that you'll ever use, and they take them out and put them in the commercial environment, they collapse.
But then when you look at what's happening, especially in the dairy industry in New Zealand, I think the beef industry is nowhere near as advanced. The way we farm our cows has been transformed in the last 10 or 15 years, from where we had cows that were basically grass-fed with a bit of hay and a bit of silage, to be animals that live maybe 30% of their intake is bought in feed now. So the move to that genetic move has been in response to that dairy farmers' willingness to buy and feed and looking for a cow that can handle large amounts of...
No, I think it's the other way around. I think this cow has created this need for the feed.
Okay.
Like, I mean, in Australia, we're probably 10 generations deep now in North American genetics in our beef and dairy herds. And our dairy herds are just heading towards feedlining the cows. And it's seen as progressive and, seems to be the way to go. But the core issue is these cattle have the genetic propensity to probably produce 14,000 litres in the right environment. They're out in a field getting a lot of green grass, which they're not that good at converting, and they're probably producing 7,000 litres. But it's my belief, with this propensity to produce 14,000 litres, they have the constant maintenance requirements of that animal. And they're only producing 7,000 to 8,000 litres.
So eating huge amounts.
Yes, that's right.
Shoving stuff down their mouth.
Exactly, and you're only getting 7,000 or 8,000, so you've got these enormous maintenance requirements, and the dairy farmers just never stop. If they're not seeing the vet off, they're seeing the nutritionist in, the person that picks up the dead cows, and it just never stops. They're up at 2 o'clock pulling calves. We see bulls, the number one bull for Australian profit rankings in the dairy industry there for 2 years was equal number 2 bull for dystocia, or calving difficulties. Yeah. When I challenged one of the boffins in the breeding industry, he said, oh, well, we don't rate that as very high. Well, I mean, how could you have a bull that's equal 2 for dystocia, being a number one bull for profit?